Welcome to yet another Tuesday with Military English. This week, as promised, the main topic will be pandemic in general, not only focusing on COVID-19. And of course, we'll compare the level 3 with level 4 in terms of the speaking exam. So, topic of the week. For the past at least 2 months now, we've been dealing with with a lot of restrictions regarding the COVID or the coronavirus pandemic. But was this the only kind of a situation like that that the whole humanity faced in its history? The word pandemic derives from the Greek words of pan and demos, which means pan in all and demos as in people, so all people. Obviously, a pandemic is an epidemic or outbreak of a disease which has an impact on a wide range of nations, continents, or it's global, and of course it's because of this it affects a lot of people. So this is what we mean by pandemic. Of course, the COVID-19 wasn't the only one or even the strongest pandemic that the humanity faced in its entire history. The biggest one was during the 14th century, which was called the Plague or the Black Death. And this pandemic took the lives of an estimated between 75 and 200 million people during its course. Why so many? I will try to tell just a bit later. A second big one was the one that mostly Europe, faced at the beginning of the 20th century. It was the influenza, commonly known as the Spanish flu, and it took the lives of between 20 and 25 million people. Comparing to what we have now, where relatively we have a small number of deaths comparing to those two, is because of the level of sanitation, hygiene and healthcare that we have now comparing to the beginning of the 20th century and going all the way back to the 14th century. Of course, in medieval times there was no hygiene whatsoever. Even on royal courts or in wealthy households, it was developing very, very slowly. In the beginning of and after the influenza pandemic, the Spanish flu, people really began, for example, to wash their hands before meals or after contact with unknown substances, other humans and so on. As a kind of a normal thing that we now do, it wasn't a thing that was widely done at the time in Europe or anywhere in the world. So in a way, the Spanish flu outbreak caused people to be more hygienic. Possibly this same thing will happen after COVID-19. We will get used to doing some things in our lives that will possibly make us more prone to any kind of coronavirus that will occur in the future. Of course, there were other outbreaks and other pandemics in the history. We had cholera, we had other forms of influenza, we have the swine flu, the bird flu, the Zika virus, and many other. Of course, they didn't take so much lives as the large virus outbreaks. But you have to also take into consideration that the COVID-19 isn't the only pandemic that is going around in the world now. We still have to remember that there has been a pandemic that's been out there for at least 40 to 50 years, and this is the HIV and AIDS. The World Health Organization, whatever we may say about it, said that the HIV and AIDS is a worldwide, it's not maybe a worldwide pandemic, but it's a regional pandemic, mostly Africa. But nonetheless, it's still very dangerous and still very contagious. Maybe not in the way as COVID-19, but still, it's a health hazard. What the governments in different countries try to focus on is how to stop the outbreak, the spread of the disease. They try to contaminate it in a way to make it safer for their citizens to go around and basically survive the pandemic. In Poland, we managed to, I think, in a way, do it a bit better than other European countries. For example, like Italy, France, Great Britain, or Spain. Of course, the leader now in the world is United States, with over 1.6 million people who have the virus, and over 100,000 deaths at the moment. We're not taking into consideration Russia and China, because those information can be somehow manipulated by the Russian and Chinese government to hide the actual fact of how many people are sick and how many people died. Of course, any country can do it, just to, for example, keep people at ease, or make people feel safer. But still nonetheless, we used to have for at least a couple of weeks very strict guidelines on how to behave outside, inside, at home, with our relatives, friends, and so on. This helped a lot in terms of, contaminating the outbreak. But nonetheless, the COVID virus is still circulating among the society. A lot of us may have passed it without even knowing it, without any kind of symptoms, and passing it to others, and that's why it's very difficult to stop the virus as such, because a lot of people obviously had no symptoms whatsoever. The others had very hard symptoms. They had to be hospitalized, they had to go under respiratory machinery, and therefore it's very hard to say if the number of people who will be still counted in Poland as sick, or the number of deaths that will occur in the process, it's still very difficult to actually to say. Nonetheless, the coronavirus, the COVID-19, or other viruses as such, will be in our society forever and ever. Of course, we may develop vaccines, but still some of the virus eventually will mutate to avoid being destroyed by the vaccine. And this is what happens, for example, in any kind of other sickness, like in the common flu. For example, if we take too many antibiotics or too much medicine, our organism will be weakened by it, and the next kind of mutation of any kind of flu or any kind of sickness will attack us with the twice as strength. So it is vital to not only rely on chemical drugs, it is vital to stay healthy in other ways, like for example eating vegetable, fruit, exercising, trying to avoid hazardous situations, and generally trying to keep fit and healthy. Basically, if you wanted, the other implications of pandemic is, of course, the situation in every single country. It not only affects every single national healthcare, depending if it's a rich country or a poor country, it also affects economy. You might have seen companies or large companies or private businesses being closed due to the pandemic and not reopening, people losing their jobs, so they are losing security as well. They don't feel independent anymore, their psychic health is deteriorating. So the pandemic doesn't have only effect on the health itself, it also has effect on every single other issue of our lives. The sooner the pandemic stops, or at least the spread of the virus can be contaminated, the better for the society. If it takes longer or we have a second wave, well, you can imagine what it will do to the country, to its people and to its economy. Let's hope, of course, that no such situation will happen, at least in Poland. The ways of contaminating it, of course, some of them have been introduced far too late in some of the countries. For example, international travel. The disease in the 14th century traveled for a long period of time from possibly what we think Asia to Europe, because they didn't have such forms of transport. Now, when you can board a plane and be in the United States or in Asia in about 10 hours, it's far easier to get sick or to catch a virus of unknown source than it was in the 14th century. So obviously the best way for Europe to regain its health is to close its external borders for about a year. So we would be able to travel within the European Union, of course, to the countries that will open their borders, and just to stay healthy, leave the external borders closed. Let's say for a year. We'll see what will happen in the United States, in South America, in Africa, and in Asia, or in the Middle East. If their situation will be better, we can open connections to every single country that has a better situation. For example, China, Thailand, Japan, Australia, and other countries that, for example, people like to visit as tourists or because for work purpose. So this is one way to of course contaminate it. The other one is finally eventually to develop a vaccine, which may take a lot of scientists say up till the end of November or December this year. Of course, that means together with the tests, if the vaccine will be successful, it's vital for every single country, for every single government, to give the vaccine to everybody who wants, not to everybody as a mandatory vaccine, but to everybody who wants. Of course, there are some people who are in the anti-vaccine movement, or they are generally regardless of what they take in terms of chemistry, because a vaccine is a kind of a chemistry support to the organism. But nonetheless, they shouldn't be in any way shunned by society because they are not vaccinated. it's their choice, of course, and if everybody else will have a vaccine inside their organism, they should be able to not gain anything with a contact with a non-vaccinated person. So 2 ways of basically how to react in the closest future, because half a year is the closest future to what's going on with the COVID pandemic. Of course, every single view that I presented is my personal own and not the one of my employer. And the second topic for today, the comparison of the 3rd and 4th level in terms of the speaking exam, the Stanag, the one we have in Poland. Basically, 3rd and 4th are almost identical in terms of the parts. The only difference is that the level 4 will try to get as much new words and new vocabulary that's possible. So the best thing to do to prepare for number 4 is study as much as you can in terms of vocabulary, the specialist one for the army, which I mentioned in the 1st and 2nd episode, and of course just to make as much as tests that are available on the site of the WS-NJO as possible. This is the only way you can prepare. And apart from that, what I mentioned in every single hour of our meetings, in every single video, listen to everything that's in English, read everything that's English, try to write from time to time, try to speak with one another in English if it's possible in your household or at work, just to practice it every single day. Without practice, you won't be able to achieve success on your exam. Right, I think that's all for me for this week. I won't be given any topic for next week, but we'll see how the situation in the United States develops, and maybe we will be talking about any kind of freedom movements, riots, dangers to democracy and things like that. So we'll see how the situation goes, and the topic for the next week will be a mystery, as it is for me now at least. So have a nice week, have a nice weekend, enjoy yourselves, keep in touch in English and with English, and see ourselves next Tuesday. Bye!